Hi there and welcome to another Q&A session. Now this week I'm going to talk about training programs and preventing tension in your upper traps and around your neck while you're shooting. So let's get to the questions. So question number one was to do with tension around the neck area and around the upper traps while you're shooting, and how this can prevent consistent draw length and expansion through the clicker. So the first thing is, you're absolutely right. If there's any tension in the upper traps and you're tending to allow the shoulders to kind of hunch up when you're shooting, this will have a really big impact on your consistent draw length and also your ability to pull through the clicker in the same way each time. So you're absolutely right there, and it's really important to get this correct. Now, in terms of improving this, the first step is to identify why you're using the upper traps and the muscles of your neck to shoot. So most of the time it's one of two reasons, and that's either you've just learnt the wrong way or you're not strong enough to use the correct muscles in your back. And often it's a combination of both of these things. So many times a beginner will be taught to shoot, but maybe they won't be strong enough for the bow they've got, so they'll develop the habit of using the upper trap muscles and the muscles around the neck. So then when they continue shooting, they just continue this pattern of using these muscles, and they never really kind of grow out of it and develop the correct patterning there. So it's really important to make sure that you understand the physical kind of sensations of using the lower muscles in your back, and also that you're strong enough to do this. So if we imagine that you're an archer right now who is generally strong in terms of kind of general conditioning and gym program, but you are shooting with kind of tension in your upper traps and your neck area, what you would need to do to start with is to make sure you understand the position that you need to get to. So what you would do for this is to shoot with maybe a light band or a light bow or something, and just to replicate the movement and come to full draw with some video feedback or coach feedback behind you to look at your back muscles, and you should be able to see clearly what the back muscles look like, and you should be able to see that you're not activating your upper traps and you're mainly using the lower muscles of the back. So you can use video feedback for this, or you can use a coach, and then you can do this with even just with your hands kind of mimicking like this, and you can see the difference between if you draw and you're using the upper muscles here compared to then letting the shoulders kind of lower down a bit and use the lower muscles of your shoulders on your back, then that's much better. So doing this is really important, because then that leads you on to the next step, which is getting the strength in these muscles required to do it properly with your bow. So once you've kind of learnt the feeling, then it's time to make sure you've got the strength and develop that strength, and then bring this into your shooting. So in terms of getting the strength, a key thing here is obviously bow training, but you must do this bow training with the right muscles and not allow your shoulder blades to creep up. So it's quite hard initially to do this. So I'd recommend bow training for sure, but then also some specific gym exercises that can help you with your shoulder control and your shoulder stability as well. So examples of these exercises include front planks, maybe straight arm front planks, side planks. So all these exercises basically encourage you to have good control of your scapula and use the correct muscles rather than allowing your shoulders to hunch up. So these are some really basic good exercises that you can then make sure that you're doing, and make sure you've got the shoulder control there. Now, once you've got this shoulder control and you can do this with a light band, it's then time to slowly progress and do this with a bow while you're shooting, and make sure that you can do this through the expansion. Now, in terms of feeling while you're shooting, what you should make sure that you're getting is that it should feel like there's a feeling of space around the actual shoulder joints. So a lot of the time beginners might try and create what they think is back tension because they've heard people talk about back tension. So they try and create tension in the back, but what they're actually doing is they're just kind of tensing the overall neck and the upper traps here, and they're not actually using the correct muscles. So I would encourage you to make sure that you think in terms of moving the body rather than creating tension, and then also make sure that there's space around the shoulder joint. If you're really tensing the neck and the upper traps, you'll feel like the shoulder joints are kind of compressed, and the bow is pressing into your kind of shoulder joints, and you can kind of feel that tightness in your joints. Whereas if you're using the correct muscles of your back and you allow your shoulders to kind of lower down a little bit, you're not pulling them down, but you're just allowing them to be in a neutral position. Then if you're in that position there, there's a lot more, it feels like there's a lot more space around the shoulder joint, and there's a lot more space to then expand through the clicker as well, which is really important, obviously. Because if you're really tight, as you mentioned before, if you're at full draw and you're really tight, then you can't really go anywhere, because you try and expand here and there's nowhere to go. It's just lots of tension. So I would encourage you to A, get the right feeling to start with, then develop your strength in the right areas, using feedback for both of these things, and then also make sure in terms of your feeling that you're thinking about the right things. Think about movement, not about creating tension, and then make sure that there's space around the shoulder joint as well, rather than kind of compression and bunching up. So those three things should help with that a lot, and I hope that answered that question. Now, question number 2 was about a training program for a recurve archer. So this is a very broad question really, and I'm going to go in a couple of different directions here to hopefully provide a little bit more clarification on this. So when it comes to training programs, there are a few kind of key areas that any training program should have. And this is to say that no matter what your situation is and where you are in your kind of archery career, there are a few key elements that your program should address. And these are basically that it should be specific to you, and it should be specific to the goals that you're going to achieve. It should include variation, so it shouldn't just be the same thing all the time. It should include different activities and different exercises or drills, or variations of intensity or scoring or shooting and stuff like that, to kind of force your body to adapt and learn new things. It should also include obviously recovery and rest, because once you've learnt something new, or once you've tested your body in a new way and improved your strength, then obviously your body needs to recover and your mind needs to recover too. And then finally, it should also include challenge in terms of really stretching you out of your comfort zone, so that you develop these areas to begin with in the first place. So these are really important aspects of this kind of developing any training program, and it's really important to make sure that these are in there, so you can use that as a little checklist to make sure that your training program is going to deliver up to the standards that you want and help you get the goals that you want. So yeah, hopefully that answers that a bit more clearly, and then we'll look at some more detailed advice on the training program. Your training program will really depend on what you're trying to get out of it. So two people's training programs might look very different depending on where they are in their archery career, or even where they are in the season. They might look really different, even if it's kind of a similar level archer. Someone who's in the off season, their training program will look very different to someone who's in the kind of the peak of the competition season, and this is just natural. So you have to kind of adapt your training program to what you want to do. So in terms of your development as an archer, you want a training program that addresses your key kind of goals and your key factors that you're working on to get better. So if we pick, for example, someone that's working on alignment, so like a large technique area, they're working on alignment and then they're working on their posture, then this is something that you want to address in your training program. Let's also say that this archer is working on general kind of strength and conditioning as well, and then mentally they're working on developing their shot cycle a bit more. So you've kind of got 4 main things there that you need to implement in this training program. So then you need to look at how you would put that in the training program on a kind of weekly basis, and then how you would improve each area consistently. So now we can go from there and look at each one of those areas. Now, in terms of the alignment and the posture work that you would be doing in this example, what you would need to do for that is to have in your training program key drills and key skill sessions where you would be working on this technique, and you would get correct feedback that would then enable you to see whether you're doing this technique correctly. Then what you also want is times where you're stretching yourself to try and see how far you've developed this skill and really push yourself out of your comfort zone with that skill. So for example, if you're developing your alignment and posture, to start with you would work probably with either an overhead camera, or maybe some kind of like a camera behind the shooting line to look at your alignment. You would use this as video feedback, and you might put this session in, let's say 3 times a week. So you might have 100 arrows 3 times a week, at Close Blank Boss with some video feedback where you're purely working on your alignment. Now, in these sessions, you would look at your alignment with the feedback and then work on getting your alignment a little bit better each time, and then using the feedback to kind of let you know if you're doing this or not. In these sessions, you would do maybe some warm up with a light bow, work on your alignment with a light bow, really kind of push yourself to see how good you can get it, then shoot some arrows with your normal bow at Blank Boss, then go back to the light bow, then shoot some arrows at Blank Boss, and this is one kind of session that you could do there, and this would just be at Close Blank Boss. Maybe you put that session in 3 times a week. So there's the kind of basic level of working on your alignment. That's in the weekly session now, so that's kind of there. Now, also with the posture, you might then want to challenge this a bit further. So you might add some different sessions in during the week that might be focused more on the posture. So these might include shooting with your feet together to kind of challenge your stability. And this might be 50 arrows, again, 3 times a week, for example. So this would just give your kind of body some sessions where you're having to adapt to a narrower stance, and it gives your kind of, it accelerates your learning a bit quicker basically, rather than if you were just to work on it with a normal stance. So this is a really good drill to do as well. Now, in terms of your shot cycle and your physical conditioning, you would also want sessions during the week for these 2 specific goals too. So for your physical conditioning, you would have certain gym sessions that you would want to do, and you would place these at certain points through the week depending on what your goal is. So maybe you would have some shoulder prehab sessions in the example that where you're working on alignment, and maybe our previous question where someone had too much tension in their upper traps. In this example, it might be good to have a shoulder prehab session before you shoot to improve the patterning of your kind of shoulder movement, and then tell your body what you want it to do while you're shooting. So that might be a really good session to do. Now, if you're then working on your general strength as well, you might have strength sessions, but it's more likely that you would want to have these strength sessions after you're shooting, so that you can go a lot harder in these strength sessions, or give yourself a little bit more rest to recover between these sessions. Now, if you've got cardio as well, you might want that kind of early in the morning to give yourself enough time to recover before you're shooting. And this cardio can help you in terms of general endurance and shooting in high humidity or high temperature and stuff like that. So these are really important aspects of this. One other thing to note in terms of training programs is that every archer should have a few main things in their training programs. These include some sort of gym work specific to what you want to achieve, some sort of shoulder prehab, some bow training, shooting training at long distance and target face work, and then obviously close distance Blank Boss to work on some technique areas. So those are what I would consider essential parts of your training program that would be universal for everyone. And then how each part looks is more specific depending on each archer, and is more kind of tailored to what your needs are at the time. So maybe you'll do kind of slightly different drills or specific exercises and stuff like that, but the main parts should be roughly the same. And these are essential for any archer, so those are really important to include in your program. So I'm going to wrap the Q&A up there for this week. Hopefully that gave a really kind of good detailed insight into those 2 areas this week. I just wanted to focus down a little bit more on those 2 things specifically, rather than answer a few more questions, but just give shorter answers. So hopefully that extra detail was useful. Let me know in the comments below if you found the detail useful, and kind of what extra things you're going to put into your training program as a result of this. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.